Excellent. I wasn't sure it was me or not. Anyway, okay, so let's have a look at Chof Omid Aleph. There's a little bit outstanding. Now, do you remember, we've learned earlier about Ma'ayim, the view of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, that you can actually get the Eidim to say that the moon, remember we spoke about this vision, but it's really in the head. It was possible to have seen the moon. And that will be good enough for them then to say, yes, we will make this month, the Rosh Chodesh on that day. Remember, it's a 30th day, which can either be the 30th day or it will convert into the first of the month. So remember, we learned review last week. What you can do is you can put people off so that you make the month that much longer, but you can't do it in reverse. And then we had a view the other way around. Then we can have a view the other way around. We had last week as well, where you can get the Eidim to say that we expected there to have been a moon. We know astronomically it was possible to see the moon. We didn't happen to see the moon. And that will be good enough. Remember? So now there's a view right at the end here. We'll close this. This will close this subject before actually we move on to something which is linked. Right at the bottom of the Omud, Rabdimi mi nahador masne ipcha. Have you got it 2 lines up? Oh, we can see you now, Mark.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah, so I couldn't get it on the computer, so I'm on my phone. But yeah, so if you don't mind learning, it's Malka Bas Ruvain.
Malka Bas.
Which Bas Ruvain.
Ruvain, right. And that's your aunt, of
that
course.
That was my late aunt. Yeah. Myers.
Myers, yes,
my late
yes.
Morris's wife.
Yeah.
And she's not having a shiver. There's no shiver because my cousins it was a stepmother.
Oh, so they're no.
So if you can learn for her, at least do something.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure someone's saying Kaddish, I'm sure.
Yeah, my cousin's saying Kaddish and they're doing Mariv every night.
They're doing Mariv, right. We should hear Basuras Davis.
Amen. Thank you.
All right. And so 2 lines from the Chof Omid Aleph. Rabdimi min Nahador. Rabdimi from Nahador. Masni Ipri. He learned this in the other way round compared to how we learned this last week, which is what? Ma'aymin al ha'edim. We warn the Eidim, or it's almost like threaten them. So yeah, we have quite strong powers here. So yeah, ma'aymin al ha'edim. Yeah, I mean, it's really pushing them. Ma'aymin al ha'edim. Ala chodesh, on a month, shelo nireh bizmanai, which was not seen in its right. This is what we spoke about last week. Mentioned some of the views on this. We got another view here. Shelo nireh bizmanu lekadsho. So that really does look like, inverted commas, not telling the truth, but it's not true. Remember, we had this point about you're saying it's enough for them to be able to say this. To make it early. So again, let's think about this. We're going from, let's say, Sunday night. Sunday night is the 30th day of the month, or it will become the first of the month, of the next month, Sunday night. So although the moon was not seen, ma'aymin, we intimidate, we not like quite threaten them, we get them to say, even though the moon was not seen then, that they can be Makadish and say, yes, it was possible to see the moon. That's really all they want. Or do you remember we saw this other pshat last week from the Pnei Yeshua, who says what we do is, if they came along and said we saw something in the sky, we won't push them to ask too many questions, if you see what I mean, because we're very keen that Sunday night should be Rosh Chodesh, Sunday night, Monday. So we're not, that's the point. I mean, where we seem to turn turn an eye to, because we're so keen. But what you mustn't do is the following. This is something new. If the moon was seen, remember, imagine Sunday night, Monday, the moon's seen. You can't then get the Eidim when they come and say they saw the moon to say, oh, we didn't see the moon. That you can't do. And do you understand the point here? So we're trying, and we have this capability. When we saw the psukim to tell us, actually it comes up later on, remember that pasuk in Emma comes up 3 times? You call them, but of course there are no vowels in the Torah. You can read that pasuk, Asher Tikru Atem. You, Bezdin, have the power to make Rosh Chodesh when you please. Obviously, it's either 29 or 30 days, but whichever one you like. But we prefer if Eidim would say they saw the moon or something like that. So, if, however, the moon was seen, you can't push off, according to this last view, and say, oh, the moon wasn't seen. Everybody saw that moon. If the moon wasn't seen, you can say, oh, astronomically, the moon could have been seen, it wasn't seen. We will call Sunday night, Monday, Rosh Chodesh, and people will say, well, probably somebody spotted the moon. We didn't, but somebody did. But you can't do that in reverse. You can't say on a Sunday night when the moon was visible and just ignore it. You cannot push Eidim who come and say they saw the moon on the 29th, going into the 30th, say we saw the moon, it's definitely Rosh Chodesh. You can't push them off from giving their testimony. Ma Tama, what's the reason as we turn the Omud? Hi Nechsa Kashikra. That really looks like Sheker. It's not true. Why is that? Look at the top line again for the Gemara. Hi Nechse Kashikra, B'haila Nechse Kashikra. Have a look at Rashi, please. Hi Nechse Kashikra. Kushen Niris Bismano. When the moon is seen at the time, which means in our example, Sunday night. So it's Sunday night, which Sunday night, Monday can either be 30 or it can be converted into day 1. If the moon was actually seen, the new moon, I'm doing the Rashi again, if it was seen, so many people, other people would, if it really was visible, why did the Bezdin make that day 30 when everybody saw the moon? So that's what you can't do. If it was not seen, and Bezdin is very keen that Sunday night should be Rosh Chodesh, and you can get the Eidim to say we saw or we know it was possible to see the moon. Ein sheker noida. People will not think, how is it possible the moon was seen? I didn't see the moon because maybe where you were, it wasn't visible, the visibility was bad, it was cloudy or whatever. Do you understand the point? So to get Eidim to say, Ro'inu, we saw or we know there was a moon, doesn't look like Sheker to the world at large. Why not? Because nobody saw the moon, so they'll think, oh, maybe somebody did. We didn't, but other people did maybe. But if it's in reverse, if everybody saw the moon, then the Bezdin cannot push Eidim off to say, oh, we're not going to make today, Rosh Chodesh, when everybody saw that moon. So that's, you do not have a right because it looks like Sheker. Okay, so basically we've got various views here as to what the Beis Din can do to enable them to make Rosh Chodesh. Remember, there were various reasons they wanted to make Rosh Chodesh. Remember, we had this rule about Lo Odu Rosh. Lo Odu Rosh, remember, they don't want to have Rosh Hashanah falling on a Sunday, Wednesday, or Friday. We spoke about that before. So there could be very good reasons that they want to try and change to ensure that doesn't happen. They can do that, but according to this view we've seen today, what they could do is they could make that Rosh Chodesh early, but they can't make it late if everybody's seen the moon. So they would have to bear that in mind in their calculations. And as I say, that therefore they wouldn't be allowed to make the month longer, according to this last view, if in fact the moon was seen by everybody. So yeah, there are various rules that the Beis Din has that they can implement to try and ensure that the Yom Tov falls on the day that they want it to fall. Now, of course, we've got the fixed calendar. The fixed calendar also does not have Rosh Hashanah falling on Aleph Daled Vov, and that's the crucial one, Lo Odu Rosh. And later on, we'll come across another rule in a bit of a rhyme, Lo Odu Rosh. Hello there. And we'll have another rule, when the rule there is Moled Zokon Baltid Rosh. Don't look for a Moled Zokon, but leave that for a minute because the Gemara went on that. So we've got the first rule, Lo Odu Rosh. And therefore, as I say, there are various rules that the Beis Din can use. Says the Gemara, Omer Shmuel, Yochilna l'tekune l'kula goyla. I am capable l'tekune, really to establish, to make l'kula goyla for everybody outside Eretz Yisrael. I know exactly what the Beis Din is going to do. Have a look at Rashi. Yochilna l'tekune below re'iyas edim. This is Shmuel speaking in Bovel, and is saying, I know exactly what they're going to do, even though I hadn't heard about I didn't know about the Eidim. Look at the third line of the Rashi. Ki boki ani betolde salvona. I am an expert in the tolde salvona. You talk about the word moiled, the freshness of the moon, v'hilucha, and the way it orbits, v'seide hamazolos, all about the constellations, the stars. I know exactly when it's going to be visible, when it isn't. And therefore, what I could really do, I could tell everybody what I would have expected the Beis Din to have done. Now, you're quite right. The Beis Din, we've said before, according to some views, can manipulate if they wanted to. But there were other views we've seen that said they can't manipulate. What Shmuel's saying is, I would know, and you can rely on me. If you don't know anything else, you can rely on me. That's really what he's saying, that this is what I would have expected with my knowledge of astronomy, my knowledge of the Moilad. I would expect when it would be visible, when it wouldn't be visible. And therefore, if it were just up to me, I would be able to tell you without even knowing about the Eidim, assuming there's good visibility, because I know the rules, and I therefore can pass this on to you. And what is really saying, according to some of the according to some of the Meforshim, what he's saying is that you could rely just on me if you don't know. You haven't heard anything from Eretz Yisrael, you could really rely on me. Says the Gemara, Omar le Abba avur de Rab Simloi. Abba, the father of Rab Simloi, said to Shmuel, you think you know a lot about the subject of astronomy, do you? Nice Gemara here. Yodama, does Sir know, with respect. That's really what he's saying. With respect, do you know the rule, Hai Milsa, Desanya Besoido Iba, which is learned in the Brisa called Sod Iba. The interesting Sod really means the hidden secrets of the Iba. There's a sefer called the Sod Iba, which interesting. Reb Chaim Kanievsky actually, amongst everything else he's written, has actually written a pirish on Sod Iba with all the maths and all the astronomy that goes with it. He's got a sefer on that too. But it was called Sod Iba, wasn't known to many people. Lots of secrets there. Not really secrets, it was really kept. Some people say the reason it was kept from the wider public is because, don't forget, we said before, there was various rules that the Bezdin might want to use and not stick to the strict letter of how and when the moon would be seen, etc. So therefore, they didn't actually publicize that sefer. It's called Sod Iba. But anyway, in that Sod Iba, it says the following. Noiled koidem chatzois or noiled ach chatzois. There's a difference if noilad, if the moon is before chatzois or after chatzois. Do you know what that's referring to? He asked Shmuel. Omalai, he said, but no, I don't actually. I'm not convinced because it's written very cryptically. All it says is Noilad Kodem. It's not talking about someone being born. It's talking about the birth of the new moon. The birth of the new moon before or after Chatzos. That's what it says. It doesn't say what the rule is, but that's the introduction to it. As I say, it's written very cryptically. Omalei loy. Omalei. So this Rab Abba, or Abba, the father Rab Simloi said to him, Midaholo Yoda, as you don't know about that. Midaholo Yodama, Ikamila Achrenaisa de la Yodama. There are probably other things as well that you don't know. So don't think yourself so clever because there are lots of things you don't seem to know. I've just picked one of these items mentioned there in this sefer called Sod Iba, and you don't know what they're referring to. So there could be other things you don't know either. Have a look at Rashi, please. Fourth line down, this Sod Iba. There's this sefer called Sod Iba, Baraisa Shenuya Biramozim. It's a brisa which is learnt only very cryptically. Have you got it? The first narrow line of the Rashi. It's written in hints. As it written just with hints, you don't really know exactly what it's referring to unless you've had a teacher who's been through this with you and will tell you exactly what it's referring to. And one of the rules mentioned there is Noilad Kodem Chatzois Oila Acha Chatzois. Doesn't tell you what it's referring to or what the halacha is about it, but just if the new moon is before or after Chatzois, there are differences. Have a look at Rashi. Kach shonu bo. That's what's written there. That's what we can learn there. V'remez ba'almahu. It's just a hint. Loida to say koidem chatzois choluk minoiled la'acha chatzois. There's a difference between whether the moon, the moiled of the moon, is before or after midday. And he quizzed Shmuel to say, what is that referring to? Have a look at the next Rashi. Yodamar machilukesh. What is the difference if the moiled of the moon is before or after Chatzos? Remember, we know exactly the time it takes. Remember, we had this point before, the 29 and a half days plus the 793 halokim, which is really spot on, the time it takes for the moon to go round. But when that moiled occurs, and the moiled really, very simple, if you have the sun, you've got the earth and the moon orbiting around the earth. When the moon is in line with the sun, in the plane, then that would be called the moiled. Of course, if it's exactly in line, there will be an eclipse of the sun. It's normally not exactly in line. It's on that plane, if you see what I mean. Or that, the plane going through, or if you took a plane going through the sun, the earth, imagine you had a plane, then when the moon would hit that plane, it wouldn't be visible at all. That's called the new moon, the moiled. And then it would pass on from there, and slowly you'd see the crescent moon. Yeah? So he's asking him and says, what's the difference if that moiled is before or after midday? And Shmuel said, I don't know. So he said to him, if you don't know that, there may be other things that you don't know either. So just be careful what you're saying about your capability, because there seem to be other things you don't know on the subject. Okay. Says the Gemara, Ki solik Rab Zera. When Rab Zera solik means went up, Listalik, he went up. Where did he go up to? Went up to Eretz Yisrael, because he originally was living in Bovel, and then he went to live in Eretz Yisrael. So when he went up there, he sent back messages. Wasn't a text. Sholach lehu, he sent them back the following message. Tzorech sheyehi lailo v'yoim min ha. It's hard, difficult now to read this. Most read the ha-chodesh. Oh, sorry, min ha-chodosh. I'm getting it wrong. You need tzorech sheyehi lailo v'yoim min ha-chodosh. You need a night and a day with the new moon. Oh, that was number one. We'll get to this in a minute. V'zu, he also sent them back the interpretation. V'zu she'oma abo avua derab simloi. Machashvin es toldo Saul. We calculate the moiled. And noiled kodem chatzos. Here's the point. He's explaining that hidden secret. What was that? If the moiled is before chatzos, be your dua, you can then know shenire somech lishkias achamo. It will be possible for the moon to be seen before sunset. Loi noiled kodem chatzos. If the moon is not seen before midday, only in the afternoon. If the moiled takes place, your calculation when you're doing this moiled, if it doesn't take place in the morning, but it's in the afternoon, after chatzos, your dua, you can know, it could not possibly have been seen late in the day, just before Shkias HaChama, around Shkias HaChama. And the Gemara then says, we'll have a look at Rashi in a moment, Lamai nafkamina. Why are you telling me all this? It's wonderful to know this. Yeah, it's a wonderful knowledge. Omer Ravashi says, La akhushe sada. If you want to disagree with the Eidim come along and say we saw the moon, you'd be able, with this formula, you'd know whether it was true or false. Maybe nobody's saying that they intentionally trying to fool anybody, but they may have made a mistake. If you know this rule, and we will explain it further in the Rashi. So he sent them two rules. Let's have a look at both these rules. The second rule is actually still used today. And I'll explain that as we go towards the end of this. Says the Gemara. Let's have a look at Rashi. Ki solik. Ki solik Rab Zera. When Rab Zera went up, Aliyah, Sholach lehu, he sent them the message. To who did he send the message? Says Rashi, Lachaverov, to his friends, Sheba Bovel, in Bovel, Shnei Devarim Shelom Adkan, two things that he learned, sharing with his friends in Bovel. The first one was this. Okay, we've got these few Rashis to look at here.
Shalom Khan, that he learned, that he had already learned here in Bovel, or that he learned in Israel when he arrived there?
Sorry? Well, he learned what they meant.
It sounds like you're implying these are things he learned in Bovel and he kept secret, or does it mean
No,
things
I'm
that he
sorry.
learned? He went to Israel, he learned in Israel something new to send back home.
Yes, that's right. He never knew what they meant, and he's sending back these two rules with their and what it means and how they can be implemented, so that his friends would know that. It sounds like he only picked that up in Eretz Yisrael. And that ties into what we said before, when we said Shmuel in Bovel did not know, when they asked him that question, what's the practical difference? Whether the moon...
Rashi says explicitly, Shalach lehu l'chaverov sheba Bovel. He's sent back to his friends in Bovel.
That's right.
Shnei Devarim Shalom Adkan, the two things he learned here.
That he learned, that's right.
Yeah.
So the things he learned in Eretz Yisrael, where in Bovel he didn't know that. Shmuel himself didn't know that, as we can see, because they quizzed him on it, and he didn't know the differences between whether the Moiled was before or after midday. So he's now sending them back these two, presumably with an explanation that he learned. Let's have a look at the Rashi here. Tzorech sheyehei lailo v'yom min ha-chodosh. The night and the day need to be of the new moon. What's that all about? Says Rashi, Hayom holech. Have you got it? Beginning of a line in Rashi. Hayom holech acha halaylo. Okay, we know that. The day follows the night, particularly these calculations too. Lihiyos hayom min ha-chodosh, so that hayom, that day will be of the new moon, shehoyo bo leil shelafonov, which had the previous night with it, and they're all linked. Lo madnu, we learned, shim niris halvona hayashona. If this is talking about visibility rather than the moiled. If the old moon was seen, mishecha shecha, once it gets dark, okay, anytime during that night, actually at the end of the month, we'll see it at the end of the month, at the end of the night, yeah? The old moon will be seen at the end of the night, but if it is visible anytime during that night, once it gets dark, and don't forget the night precedes the day. Have a look at Rashi again. Yom Esrim V'Tisha. So 29 going into 30. And that's 29 going into 30. Imagine it's a Sunday going into Sunday night. And it's the 29th, which is Leil Shaloshim, the night going into 30, could be, or it might be Rosh Chodesh. Okay? If that old moon was seen anytime during that night, then Ein Mekadshim Oisa B'Yom Shloshim. If people think they saw the moon at the end, the new moon, at the end of that day. So again, Sunday night going into Monday. The old moon was seen sometime during the night of Sunday night going into Monday morning, right? Then if people come forward and say Monday late afternoon, We saw the new moon. We don't count it. Can't be counted. Says Rashi,
But hold on a second. How would you know? I mean, on the 29th day, you're only going to see a slither of whatever you're going to see is going to be very
small. Okay.
Very small. So you can't tell whether it's actually the beginning of the.
Yes, you would.
Or
yes,
whether
you
it's
would.
the old one. How can you distinguish?
The old one is only seen just before sunrise. Don't forget the moon is orbiting and going round. So it's just ahead of the sun, just prior to Rosh Chodesh. It then crosses over that plane, and the crescent moon is then seen just after the sun, or towards the sun setting. You with me? At the end of the month, the moon is seen before, it's like before the sun. So in other words, it's only seen at the end of the night. But once you've got sunrise, it may be you could still see the moon. But obviously, if it's getting closer and closer, it's going to be impossible to see that moon because of the glare of the sun. So at the end of the night, imagine people saw the moon Sunday night going into Monday, right? So first thing Monday morning, just before sunrise, you see that moon. Then what we're saying is it's impossible at the end of, that was Sunday night going into Monday, Monday late afternoon, just before sunset, you're seeing that small moon, the new moon. Says Rashi, we don't accept it. You've got to have a night and a day without seeing the old moon. If there was any time during that night or day that you saw the old moon, and I say the old moon is always, if you like, looking up at the sky, the old moon is always to the right of the sun, if it's visible at all. You with me? That's why just prior to sunrise, you've got the moon, and then you'd have the sun, and then the glare of the sun would block out the vision of the moon. Have I confused you? Hope not. Let me just say once again, you cannot have the old moon seen any time during that day for that day to be Rosh Chodesh. If the old moon was seen, and it would be seen if at all, late in the night, I mean very much towards the morning, if you saw the old moon, as Rashi just said, the night and the day is one complete day. You've got to have a complete day without that old moon. If you had the old moon in that night, late at night, and if you have the new moon on Monday, late Monday afternoon, that is not counted as a Rosh Chodesh. Okay?
Because it's not the new moon. Because it's not the new moon.
Well, let's continue Rashi.
That's what you're implying.
You're right, that's the implication. So again, you need to have a night and a day of the Chodosh, the new moon. If you've got the old moon, any part of the night or day, that day is not going to be considered a Rosh Chodesh. You cannot make a Rosh Chodesh. You okay, Sammy? Looks like there's some fun and games going on here. Just okay, sorry.
So would they have does that mean we have to have witnesses from the 29th to say we saw it?
No,
at the end?
not the
That's
witness.
just common knowledge. Everyone knows
that
it was seen.
He's passing to his friends in the Bezdin. He's passing this message that's the way it works, that it's going to be impossible. If it's visible, certainly if they didn't come along and say they saw the moon and you know that the moon was, imagine witnesses come and say, we saw the moon on Monday, late Monday afternoon, the new moon. We will not accept that because the moon was visible on the Sunday night going into Monday.
Yeah.
Says Rashi, the im toima, and if you'll ask, which means it's a question, pshita. That's obvious. Why? The ein makachin. Says Rashi, not much of a chiddush. It's going to be impossible. Of course you can't. Why? Shahare lo tira hachadosha b'yom shloshim. It's just impossible for that to happen. Your example of seeing the old moon Monday morning, just before daybreak, and seeing the new moon at the end of Monday, it can't happen. Why not? Says Rashi, there's no way the new moon's going to be seen on that day. Why not? De Kaimalon, we have the well-known principle, well, it will be when we've gone through all the Gemaras, that Esrim va'abo sho'o mechse sihara kedomrinan lekamon. The Gemara later on will tell us, not for tonight, but the Gemara will tell us that the moon is not visible for 24 hours. Why is that? Because the glare of the sun prevents visibility of the moon. Theoretically, of course, it's past the moilad, but if it's just past the moilad, the crescent is so small, and it would have to be so close to the sun that you couldn't see it. You wouldn't be able to see it. It would, the glare of the sun would mean it's impossible to see that moon. Now, there's 24 hours. In other words, you've got the moilad, and you've got there's a 24-hour period where the moon will not be visible. If that's the case, obviously, if the old moon was seen sometime at night, Sunday night going into Monday, you saw the old moon, the rule is 24 hours. There's no way that day you're going to see the new moon. What type of chiddush is this? Asks Rashi. So let's have a look at that again. The Imtoima, says Rashi.
What does the word sihara mean? I didn't.
Sihara is a word, is moon. Sahar.
Is what?
Another word for the moon.
Oh, I see.
Sahar.
What's the shorish of that?
Samachay Reish. Sahar. Sahara. You find that Sihara, Sahar, ala Sahar. Yeah, so it's a word for meaning the moon. V'im Toima Pshita, says the Rashi, doing that line again. You won't see it. If you've seen the old moon, there's no way you're going to see the new moon. We know that. I don't need anybody to tell us you're not going to accept the witnesses. No, it's impossible. The Kaimalon, Esrim Babor Shor Mechse Sihara. Yeah, that's Aramaic we're talking about. In Aramaic, Sahar is moon. You can check that when you're doing your, have a look at some Targum, Mervyn. Next time we have a look at Torah, I think you'll find Sahar, Sihara, often used if you've had the Lavona, Sihara. Okay? Kudomrinan lekamon. So do you understand what Rashi's asking? Rashi's asking this bit of information that was being sent. Yeah? It was being sent by Rab Zera. Useless. It's an obvious thing. If the old moon was seen, the new moon will not be seen for 24 hours. So that's an obvious rule. We know that for later on, in which case you haven't told us anything. Says Gemara Itzrich, it's needed. Why? Laman da Omar, according to the view. Remember, going back to what we said before, Ma'aimim al ha'edim ala chodesh sheno nire bizmanai. We learned today that you can push the Eidim to say, we saw the new moon, even if they didn't see it. Remember, that's what we saw today. On that 30th day, if you're very keen, Bezdin, to have that day Rosh Chodesh, even if the moon was not visible, you can say, oh, we knew, and you can add this Lashon Re'iyah, to be able to make that day Rosh Chodesh, okay? Even, again, look at the line of Rashi, Shalom Nira, if the moon was not seen at the right time, that means on day 30, Lekadsha, you can still make it holy, you can make that a Rosh Chodesh if you wanted to. For Ashma Inon, however, what Rab Zera was saying is the following. Dim Niris Hayashona Balayla. If sometime during that night the old moon was seen, then Bezdin, we are telling you, don't make today Rosh Chodesh. Ein ma'aymin. Why? Sheharei hakol ro'u shahalayla min ha-chod. This one, it really is ha-chodesh she'ova. That's the point. What they're saying is this. Even if you want to use your manipulations to make today Rosh Chodesh when the moon actually wasn't seen, once the old moon is seen, don't make that day Rosh Chodesh. Because there are people around who know that rule of the 24-hour rule, and they will say, that can't be. You with me? So that's what we're saying. Yes, we know that within 24 hours, the moon will not be seen. If you've seen the old moon, there's no way you're going to see the new moon in 24 hours. But there's a rule that the Bezdin can make that day Rosh Chodesh if they wanted to. What Rab Zera was saying is, don't do it. Make sure it's got to be a day, a night and a day, because that's a complete day where the old moon was not seen. If the old moon was seen in the night, then don't make that day Rosh Chodesh, even if you're keen, because of, remember the Od Lo Odu Rosh rule, you're very keen to make that day Rosh Chodesh, you can't do it. If the old moon was seen, don't make that day Rosh Chodesh. You with me? However, if the old moon was not seen, theoretically it was possible for Monday the moon to be seen, but for whatever reason it was cloudy and the moon was not seen. In that instance, yes, what you can do is you can get the Adam to say, Ro'inu, we know that there should have been a moon, and make that day Rosh Chodesh. So very interesting. What we're saying, therefore, with this first rule is if the old moon is seen at night, Bezdin, don't make that day Rosh Chodesh. Even if you're keen to make that day Rosh Chodesh, for whatever reason, and you can do that, you have the power to, don't do that, because there will be people around who will say it's impossible. What is the Bezdin doing? I thought the Bezdin knew what they were doing, and it'll belittle the Bezdin, and people will say it's not true. It can't be right. So therefore, don't do that. Even if you're keen, once the old moon is seen, and that's the rule of Tzorech Shelaylo v'yom min hachodosh, or min hachodesh. If a chodesh means the new month, what you must not have, therefore, is any part of that day or night, the previous night, where the old moon is seen. If the old moon is seen, then you'll be barred from making that day Rosh Chodesh, even if you're keen to do so. So that is rule number one. We're keen on rule number two, because that was the rule that Shmuel got caught on. What's the second rule? Have a look at the Gemara, or have a look at the Rashi. And the rule that Abba Avur de Reb Samloi quizzed Shmuel about. And what was that rule? Zushi Omar, have you got the beginning of the line is Abba in the Gemara? Abba Avur de Reb Simloi, the father of Reb Simloi, that what? Mechashvin es toil dosai. You calculate when the molad was, and we know between every molad is 29 and a half plus your 793 chalokim. And then have a look at the following calculation. Noilad koidem chatzos, if the molad's before midday, biyodua shelire somach lishkias achama. The moon could be seen, certainly Yodua, it's known that it, obviously, assuming you've got a clear night, then the moon could be seen that day. And that's the rule about the midday rule. Nothing to do with the midday sun. The midday rule is if the moilad's prior, then you could make that day Rosh Chodesh. If the moilad, we're not talking about visibility of the old moon here. If the moilad's in the morning, then it's possible to see the moon that day before the end of the day. But if have a look at Rashi again. If the moiled was not before chatzos, it's in the afternoon, even a moment after midday. There's no way that the new moon could be seen before Shkias HaChama. That's the rule. Have a look at Rashi. V'zu, what was the second rule that he gave them? She'oma Abba Avur de Reb Samloi. Remember this, the quiz that he gave Shmuel? Lifnei Shmuel, says Rashi. When he said it to him in the cryptic way it's written in this brisa, all it says is Nolad Kodem Chatzos, Nolad Acha Chatzos, doesn't say what it's referring to. I'm doing the Rashi again. Ma, beginning the line is Ma. Got that in Rashi? Ma chiluk. What difference is there if the moon is before or after midday? I'm now going to reveal this to you because I've learned this in Eretz Yisrael, and you should know that they're in Babel too. Machashvin, what's this machashvin? La choshev, to think, or machshava, or machashev, talking about computers and things. Machashvin es moilet halvona. Do a calculation, work out when is the moiled. Moiled koidem chatzos. If the moiled is before chatzos, this doesn't mean midnight, it means midday. Rashi stresses that, otherwise one could get confused. Moiled koidem chatzos hayoim, says Rashi. B'yodua, you should know, shenire hayoim koidem shetishka chama. The moon is visible, possibly visible, or it depends on, as I say, clouds, etc. Koidem shetishka chama, before sunset of that day. Why? This is the point he was making. She'ein halvana miskase mipnei Eretz Yisrael. What he's saying, it because it depends when in the year, depends where you are geographically. In Eretz Yisrael, she'ein b'marov, compared to Bovel, elo sheish shois acha chidusha. Have you got a little aleph next to the word elo in the Rashi?
Yeah.
Good. That you know where that takes you to, the Agos Habach, Rabbi Yoel's circus. He changes the text a little bit. When he changes it, it means he found other texts that say this is what Rashi should say. I'm reading that if you've got it around the side of your Gemara. Right? They are in the west, Bamarov, mitoich koitno, because of the size of the moon, as we explained, just after the molid is extreme. The crescent is very small, but getting larger the whole time. Mitoich koitno, ella sheishois. The first 6 hours, yes, we know there's a 24-hour period where the moon is not visible. But once you've hit the molid, it's possible to see the moon 6 hours, because you would have had to have 18 hours the other side of this, of the old, but 6 hours after the moon. In other words, for the first 6 hours after the molid, there is no way the moon could be visible. After 6 hours, yes. I'm doing the Agos Habach. Shehalovono la'olam. Go back to our Rashi. B'sheishois la'acha chidusha. For those 6 hours after its renewal, b'keren marovis to roimis, in the southwestern side, as you're looking southwest, v'niris lehem, it is visible to them in Eretz Yisrael. What he's saying, therefore, is this, that if the moiled was before Chatzos, 6 hours after that, as we're talking here around the equinox time, where you remember we've got a 12-hour day, 12-hour night. Yeah. If the moon, or start again, if the moiled is prior to Chatzos, that means you've got now 6 hours for the visibility of the moon, for that crescent moon to have been that much larger. Just those 6 hours makes all the difference. And therefore it's possible to have that day being Rosh Chodesh. Look at the next Rashi. If, however, the moiled of the moon was after midday, you haven't now got 6 hours. We're talking about around the equinox, yeah? You haven't got any 6 hours anymore. Therefore, there's no way the moon will be seen today. It's going to be far too small, the crescent. Kol sheish shois v'ne'elemes, it's hidden me'ein koil, from the eyes of all. And
is this arguing against the 24-hour rule then?
No, they go together. There's a 24-hour rule, and what he's saying, in Eretz Yisrael, it's an 18-6 rule. Rather than 12-12, it's an 18-6. What do I mean by that? It's 18 hours you won't see the old moon, and 6 hours you won't see the new moon, and then after that you already see the new moon. So that's the breakup of those 24 hours is 18-6, and that's why Chatzos is so important. And that may well be why Shmuel didn't know what he meant before or after Chatzos, because we've got the 24-hour rule, but what the message coming back was in Eretz Yisrael, 6 hours after the Moiled, then the moon is visible, could be visible. Again, what about clouds? And says Rashi that what's the importance? Lamai nafkamina, two medium-sized Rashis. Lamai nafkamina, lemechshev hari alpi edim on the makachim. Normally, we will be makadish alpi witnesses. So why do you need to know this? Wait till the witnesses see the moon. Says Rashi, la'achushe sada, to disagree with these witnesses. Im noiled achachatzos, here we have it. If actually the moiled was after midday, it was 1 p.m. GMT, let's say, or standard winter time in Israel. Va'omru, they said, just before Shkia Zachama, we saw that small crescent moon. We want today to be Rosh Chodesh. We saw the moon. They are not telling the truth. We're not saying was it done intentionally necessarily, but what we are saying it's impossible. And that's why this bit of information is very useful for you rabbis. Is passing it on to them to tell them that that information tells you that once the moiled is any time in the afternoon, that day cannot be Rosh Chodesh. And it's no more than that, the moon cannot be seen. It's going to be far too small, the crescent moon, too close to the sun for it to be seen. So if anybody said they saw the small moon, they didn't. They might have seen a cloud formation looking like a crescent, but they have not seen the moon. And that is the interpretation of this rule. And it's very interesting. I don't know if people have got, well, I have in front of me, a luach. Very interesting. I'll tell you just very briefly, those people who've got a luach, but it needs to have the moiled in it. Not the standard calendar doesn't always put the moiled in, but I will compare Tofshin Pei Tofshin Pei Aleph and Tofshin Pei Base. And this rule comes into play with the calendar that Hillel set up. And although, of course, we've got a fixed calendar, one of the rules he used was that Rosh Hashanah, that means the first of Tishri, normally will fall on the day when the Moiled is. If the Moiled is sometime in that 24-hour period, that day will be the first of Tishri. However, If the Moiled is after midday, that day will never be Rosh Hashanah, even though we've got a calendar, and the calendar, whatever you like, that rule has followed through. And in the calendar we have today, if the Moiled is after midday, that day will not be the first of Tishri. And it's fascinating because Tov Shin Pei Base, the year we're currently in, you can check this, those people have a Luach sometime later. I've got a Luach in front of me. Here we are. The Luach for Tov Shin Pei Base tells me that the Moiled of Tishri was on, let's just get the wording here, Tuesday. Fascinating. Actually, Leil Gimel, that's Monday night going into Tuesday at 11:27 and 11 Chalokim p.m. night. So it's Monday night going into Tuesday, 23 hours, that means 11 o'clock at night, 27 minutes, 11 Chalokim. Therefore, Rosh Hashanah, actually, it was a Monday going into a Tuesday. Therefore, Rosh Hashanah could be on the Tuesday, and it is on the Tuesday. This year, Rosh Hashanah, the first day Rosh Hashanah, the first of Tishri, is on a Tuesday, because the Moiled was sometime during that day. However, remember there's another rule, Lo Odu Rosh. We know about Lo B'du Pesach, Lo Odu Rosh. Remember, we don't want Rosh Hashanah to fall on a Sunday, Wednesday, Friday. Well, Tuesday is not Sunday, Wednesday, or Friday, so that's fine. So it goes like this, Lo Odu Rosh, but the first thing you do is you look, when was the Moiled? If the Moiled sometime during that 24-hour period, then you'd expect that day to be the first of Tishri. We still use that rule. Other than you then have to look and see, does it fall foul of the Lo Odu Rosh rule? Because if that day, the first of Tishri, is going to be a Sunday, Wednesday, Thursday, then the calendar would have worked out that it wouldn't have fallen on one of those days, but it will be the next day. You with me? Now, so Lo Odu Rosh, and what's called a Moiled Zokein Lo Tidrosh. Don't look into a Moiled Zokein, an old Moiled, not at the beginning of the day, late in the day. That's called a Moiled Zokein. If you've got an old Moiled, what do you mean? Compared to that whole 24-hour period, it's very late in that. That's called a Moiled Zokein. Don't Tidrosh. Don't sick out something like that, because you won't have the first of Tishri falling on that day. Do you remember that's what we saw today? If the Moiled falls after midday, that day will not be the first of Tishri. We only use this for Tishri, okay? Now, go back a year, Tov Shin Pei Aleph, which I've got in front of me, and the Moiled was on Thursday, 14 hours, 38 minutes and 7 Chalokim. That's the point where the moon is crossing that plane between the sun and the earth. Okay? Again, I repeat the time and the day, a Thursday, 14 hours, 38 minutes, 7 Chalokim. So, Thursday, we'd like the first of Tishri to be on a Thursday. But remember the rule we learned today? If it's after midday, we can't do it because there's no way the moon would have been seen on that day. If the Moiled is at 14 hours, 14 is after 12 hours of the day. So I'm afraid that day cannot be the first of Tishri. So what's going to happen? It will have to be pushed off a day. So it won't be Thursday. The first of Tishri last year should have been on a Friday. But there's another rule we know, lo odu rosh. So therefore, the 1st of Tishri last year was not on a Thursday, not on a Friday. It was pushed over to Shabbos. And if you look at the last year's calendar, you'll find the 1st of Tishri is on Shabbos, where in fact the Moiled is on Thursday afternoon. So it's well after that Moiled, but there's nothing we can do about that. You with me? Thursday afternoon is too late for that day to be the 1st of Tishri. So you'd have to push it off to the next day. The next day's a Friday. Trouble. Have to go off to Shabbos. So last year, you had a very big gap between the 1st of Tishri and the Molud, which was like a day and a half early. It was on Thursday afternoon. And it's only Friday night going into Shabbos was the Molud. But that's because of the rule we learned today, which is if the Moiled is after midday, that day cannot be the 1st of the month. And I say that rule carries over to us. When Hillel made his calendar, he didn't want that rule to be ignored when we're looking at Tishri. And therefore, you'll always find that whenever you look at the Moiled for Tishri, you'll find that if it's before midday, that day will be the 1st of Tishri. If it's after that, the midday, it will not be that day, will be the next day, unless the next day is one of the rules of Aleph Daled Vav. And with that, gentlemen, we will close for today. Fascinating.